when a routine political ambush turned into the most watched moment in television history, not because of scandal or controversy, but because of 5 words that revealed a secret connection spanning 2 decades, 3 continents, and the depths of human forgiveness that left an entire nation in tears. Former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi left a national television audience breathless when she revealed her connection to Pope Robert Prevost during what was meant to be a standard political confrontation. What started as typical commentary on current affairs took a dramatic shift when the host questioned her faith-driven perspective. Yet when Bondi disclosed an intensely personal bond to the new pope's transformative work in Peru, even the most cynical political observers in the studio became speechless, with many openly weeping. The moment shattered political barriers and revealed something far more profound, an undeniable truth about human worth that blindsided everyone. If you treasure narratives that pierce through political chaos to unveil our shared humanity, please like and subscribe for more content illuminating these extraordinary moments of unity across divisions. Pam Bondi had been circulating through news outlets to address her recent nomination to a presidential task force on law enforcement. As Florida's former attorney general and an experienced prosecutor, she had cultivated a reputation as an astute legal intellect with unwavering conservative principles. However, today's segment on National Focus, a morning program notorious for its confrontational interview approach, would never be a cordial encounter. The show's anchor, Marcus Winters, had built himself as an intimidating interviewer who took pride in interrogating political personalities from every political spectrum. His blunt, frequently hostile questioning had transformed National Focus into essential viewing for political insiders, though detractors contended his methods fueled the nation's increasingly fractured public dialogue. Bondi reached the studio 30 minutes prior to broadcast. She had dedicated the previous evening strategizing probable questions with her advisors, crafting responses covering everything from border policies to judicial decisions. The program's coordinators had suggested they would concentrate on her task force responsibilities and potentially address current Supreme Court proceedings. What Bondi concealed from her preparation team was the tiny silver pendant she carried in her pocket, a memento from an intensely personal encounter in Peru 15 years prior that had fundamentally transformed her perspective, though she seldom discussed it openly. The pendant had been gifted to her by then-Bishop Robert Prevost, who had recently ascended to Pope following his predecessor's unexpected abdication. While waiting in the green room, Bondi could hear Winters conducting a characteristically combative interview with a Democratic senator. The conversation was fierce, with Winters constantly interrupting and disputing the senator's declarations. This was routine protocol on National Focus, where policy conversations rapidly deteriorated into verbal battles engineered more for viewership than enlightenment. "We're joining former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi in 3 minutes," announced a production coordinator, offering Bondi a water bottle. Bondi acknowledged, understanding what lay ahead. The significance of this appearance extended far beyond advancing her task force work. In today's hyper-partisan environment, any error or emotional display could be extracted, stripped of context, and circulated indefinitely online. Public officials like her existed perpetually one statement away from a career-defining instant, for better or worse. When the coordinator returned to guide her to the set, Bondi briefly touched the pendant in her pocket. She hadn't intended to explore her faith or personal experiences on air. These subjects were private and frequently weaponized in political arenas. Yet sometimes she contemplated that the most significant moments weren't orchestrated at all. The studio illumination was intensely bright as she settled into her seat opposite Winters. Behind his rehearsed smile, she could detect the calculated expression in his gaze. He wasn't seeking a conversation. He was pursuing a moment, a slip-up, an overreaction, anything that would generate engagement and dispute. "We're broadcasting. In 5, 4, 3. The floor coordinator counted down silently with gestures. Winters pivoted to the camera with practiced accuracy. "We're continuing with former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, recently designated to the President's Task Force on Law Enforcement." Attorney General Bondi, welcome to National Focus. What transpired next would convert a standard political interview into something neither Winters, the studio participants, nor the millions viewing at home had envisioned. An exceptional moment of genuine human connection that would surpass the political boundaries typically characterizing such interactions. The interview commenced predictably enough. Winters launched with inquiries about Bondi's task force appointment, pressuring her regarding controversial policing methods and reform initiatives. Bondi responded with the controlled poise characteristic of veteran political figures, neither divulging too much nor appearing evasive. Your task force has faced criticism for being overly accommodating to law enforcement concerns, Winters challenged, inclining forward. Critics argue you're not genuinely committed to addressing systemic problems. How do you counter? The task force encompasses varied viewpoints, Bondi replied. Our objective isn't safeguarding institutions but reinforcing communities through balanced public safety approaches. This dialogue persisted for several minutes, with Winters pressing and Bondi responding diplomatically. The interview was advancing along predictable patterns, neither especially remarkable nor controversial by the program's standards. Viewers at home might have been monitoring their devices or organizing their day, anticipating nothing groundbreaking. From this segment, then emerged the turn that would revolutionize everything. Let's discuss your recent statements on immigration policy, Winters declared, his tone intensifying. You proposed that faith-based principles should guide our border security approach. Isn't that imposing religious beliefs on policy issues? Bondi hesitated briefly. I believe human dignity should be fundamental to all policy dialogues. That viewpoint aligns with my faith, certainly, but it's a universal principle transcending religious limitations. Winters detected an opportunity. However, not everyone embraces your religious framework. The new pope, Robert Prevost, originates from a vastly different background than previous pontiffs. He's emphasized a more progressive stance on social matters. Doesn't that undermine conservative religious arguments regarding immigration? The mention of Pope Prevost's name triggered a subtle yet noticeable transformation in Bondi's demeanor. She lightly touched her jacket pocket where the pendant rested. Actually, Marcus, I've had the honor of encountering Robert Prevost long before he became pope. Her voice acquired a quality seasoned interviewers immediately recognize. The sound of someone transitioning from rehearsed talking points to personal authenticity. Winters, sensing a potential breakthrough, leaned in slightly. You've met the new pope? 15 years ago in Peru, Bondi continued. Few people are aware of this, but I spent 3 weeks there following a personal catastrophe in my life. My brother had died unexpectedly, and I was questioning everything. My career, my purpose, my faith. The studio grew noticeably quieter. This wasn't the political sparring the audience had anticipated. I visited a mission in Lima where then Bishop Prevost was serving. I didn't seek spiritual counsel. I was there as part of a legal advisory team assisting with adoption regulations, but I was clearly struggling. Bondi's voice remained steady, but her eyes revealed the emotional weight of the memory. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, I was sitting alone in the mission's courtyard. Bishop Prevost discovered me there. He didn't know who I was professionally, just that I was someone in anguish. He sat with me for hours, listening as I expressed my grief and uncertainty. Winters, trained to interrupt and challenge, remained uncharacteristically silent. What impressed me was that he never attempted to transform my pain into a theological lesson. He simply acknowledged it as genuine and deserving of witness. When you're suffering, that recognition means everything. The camera operator, recognizing the significance of the moment, tightened the frame on Bondi's face. In the control room, the director made the unusual decision to maintain this single shot, rather than alternating between perspectives. The following day, Bishop Prevost invited me to participate in a community outreach program in one of Lima's most impoverished neighborhoods. I observed as he navigated between government officials, local community leaders, and families in crisis. never altering his approach, regardless of someone's status or authority. Bondi reached into her pocket and retrieved the small silver pendant, displaying it for the camera. He gave me this before I departed. It's a medal of St. Thomas More, the patron saint of politicians and lawyers. Bishop Prevost told me, "Remember that your work isn't about power, it's about people. When the two conflict..." At this point, the interview had completely transformed. What had begun as a typical political exchange was now something else entirely, a genuine human moment unfolding on live television. "So when you ask me about Pope Prevost's approach to social issues," Bondi continued, her voice growing stronger, "I don't think in terms of progressive or conservative frameworks. What I witnessed in him was something more fundamental, a commitment to human dignity that defies political categorization." The tension in the studio was palpable, not from conflict, but from the rare authenticity breaking through the polished veneer of political discourse. Several production assistants were visibly moved. Even Winters, a veteran interviewer known for his emotional detachment, seemed affected by Bondi's unexpected vulnerability. But the most powerful moment was yet to come, a revelation about Pope Prevost's work in Peru that would connect deeply with viewers across political spectrums and bring many to tears. Marcus Winters, recognizing that something extraordinary was happening, made a decision unusual for his interviewing style. He simply asked, "What did you see him do in Peru that stayed with you?" Bondi looked directly at Winters, her political persona completely. "I witnessed something I've never spoken about publicly. It's shaped every decision I've made since, though few would connect my policies to this experience." She took a breath before continuing. Bishop Prevost had established a reconciliation program in a region torn apart by political violence. Former enemies, people whose families had killed each other during the conflicts of the 1980s and 90s, were brought together in a community rebuilding project. The studio was completely silent now. Even the typically restless camera operators and production assistants stood motionless. One day, a mother confronted the man who had killed her son during the violence. Everyone expected rage, perhaps even violence. Instead, after an excruciating silence, she asked him to help her rebuild her son's school, which had been destroyed in the conflict. Bondi's voice remained steady, but tears had formed in her eyes. Bishop Prevost had created a framework where justice and mercy could exist together, where accountability didn't preclude redemption. The man worked alongside the mother for 2 years. I watched their relationship transform from blinding hatred to something I can only describe as sacred recognition of each other's humanity. At this point, several people in the studio were openly crying. A production assistant quickly wiped tears from her cheeks. Even Winters, known for his unflappable demeanor, appeared moved. "The final day I was there," Bondi continued, "I witnessed the opening ceremony for the completed school. The mother spoke publicly for the first time about her journey from vengeance to reconciliation. She said something I've carried with me every day since. Justice without the possibility of redemption is just another form of violence." Bondi held up the pendant again. "When Bishop Prevost gave me this, he told me that power, whether in church, government, or any institution, exists to serve this possibility of transformation. Not to punish endlessly, not to divide people into worthy and unworthy, but to create conditions where broken things can be made whole again." The camera caught a tear rolling down Bondi's cheek, but her voice never wavered. "What makes me emotional isn't just the memory. It's knowing that the man who showed me this vision of justice is now Pope. Someone who understands that the deepest political and spiritual questions aren't abstract, but embodied in how we treat each other in our most wounded moments." What happened next stunned everyone in the studio. Marcus Winters, the interviewer known for never revealing his personal thoughts, said quietly, "My brother died from addiction 3 years ago. I've been angry at the system, at him, at everything. What you're describing, that's what I've been looking for. Some way to make meaning without erasing the loss." The camera, which should have cut away from this breach of journalistic convention, stayed fixed on Winter's face. The director, sensing the unprecedented nature of the moment, let it unfold. "That's why Pope Prevost matters beyond religious boundaries," Bondi said gently. "He represents something we're all hungry for, the possibility that our deepest wounds might be the foundation for a more humane world, rather than reasons to further entrench our divisions." The control room producer, through Winter's earpiece, indicated they should go to commercial. Winters, in an extraordinary moment of defiance, removed the earpiece. "We need to hear this," he said, addressing not just Bondi but the viewers. Not as Democrats or Republicans, but as people trying to make sense of a broken world. Bondi reached across the table, another breach of the invisible barrier between interviewer and subject, and briefly touched Winters's hand. "Bishop Prevost, now Pope, showed me that the most powerful response to suffering isn't policy or ideology. It's presence, simply being willing to stand with people in their pain without trying to explain it away or exploit it." The camera pulled back to reveal that nearly everyone in the studio was weeping openly. The artifice of television production had completely fallen away, replaced by a moment of genuine human connection. In television terms, this was the triumph, not of Bondi over Winters or vice versa, but of authentic human connection over the performative nature of political discourse. What had been exposed was not scandal or contradiction, but the universal hunger for meaning and reconciliation that transcends political identity. And as the segment finally cut to commercial several minutes later than scheduled, social media was already exploding with reactions from viewers witnessing something they'd never seen before. A political interview that had become a moment of collective emotional catharsis. The impact of Bondi's interview was immediate and profound. Within hours, the segment had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms. Bondi's Prevost moment began trending nationally, with viewers from across the political spectrum sharing how the exchange had affected them. Marcus Winters's network, initially concerned about his unprecedented breach of journalistic distance, quickly recognized the value of what had transpired. The full unedited interview was rebroadcast in prime time that evening, drawing the highest ratings in the network's history for a news program. Media analysts struggled to categorize what had happened. Was it a political interview, a spiritual testimony, or something entirely new? The moment seemed to defy the usual frameworks of media criticism. For Pam Bondi, the aftermath brought both opportunity and challenge. Invitations for speaking engagements flooded in, not just from conservative political organizations, but from universities, interfaith groups, and international peace-building initiatives. The pendant she had shown on air became a symbol referenced in discussions about justice reform and reconciliation politics. 3 days after the interview, Bondi received a personal phone call from Pope Prevost himself. "Your words honored the people of Peru more than they honored me," he told her. "Thank you for remembering them." Their conversation, which lasted nearly an hour, renewed their connection and led to an invitation for Bondi to participate in a Vatican conference on restorative justice the following year, an invitation she immediately accepted. Marcus Winters experienced his own transformation in the wake of the interview. His public acknowledgement of his brother's death and his own grief opened something in him and his approach to journalism. While maintaining his incisive interviewing style, he incorporated a new segment into his program called Common Ground, exploring issues from perspectives that transcended partisan frameworks. "The Bondi interview taught me something essential about my profession," Winters explained in a subsequent interview. "We've become so focused on conflict as the driver of engagement that we've neglected the equally powerful human desire for connection and meaning." Perhaps most significantly, the interview sparked a broader conversation about the role of personal experience in political formation. Political scientists noted an uptick in public figures sharing formative experiences that shaped their policy perspectives, moving beyond the abstraction of ideology to the concrete realities that informed their worldviews. A month after the interview, Bondi published an essay detailing more of her experience in Peru and how it had shaped her approach to criminal justice reform, positions that had sometimes puzzled her political allies. The essay revealed her seemingly tough-on-crime stance contained nuances informed by what she had witnessed in Peru, accountability coupled with pathways to redemption. For many viewers, the most lasting impact came from witnessing vulnerability, from public figures typically ensconced in carefully constructed personas. The sight of both Bondi and Winters momentarily setting aside their professional roles to connect as human beings affected people deeply in an era of increasing polarization. I've disagreed with Pam Bondi on virtually every policy position. One prominent liberal commentator wrote, "But watching that interview reminded me that behind political disagreements are human beings shaped by experiences I know nothing about. That doesn't change my positions, but it changes how I understand those who hold different ones." 6 months later, the Vatican announced that Pope Prevost would be expanding the reconciliation program first piloted in Peru to other regions experiencing political violence and division. The announcement specifically credited greater awareness of the Peruvian experience as catalyzing international support for the initiative, a direct reference to the impact of Bondi's interview. For the production team at National Focus, the legacy of the interview was bittersweet. The unscripted human moment had generated unprecedented engagement, yet it could not be manufactured or replicated. It stood as evidence that authentic human connection, even more than conflict or controversy, was what audiences ultimately hungered for. A year after the interview, Bondi and Winters appeared together at a conference on media and civic dialogue. Their unlikely friendship, born from a moment of shared vulnerability, embodied the possibility of connection across difference that Pope Prevost had demonstrated in Peru years earlier. What happened that day wasn't about politics or religion, Bondi reflected during the conference. It was about the universal experience of suffering and the human capacity for transformation. Pope Prevost showed me this in Peru, and somehow, in that studio with Marcus, we managed to share it with others. The most profound testament to the interview's impact came in thousands of letters and messages from ordinary viewers who described watching the segment multiple times, often with family members from whom they had become estranged over political differences. Many reported that the interview had opened conversations previously thought impossible, creating space for recognition of shared humanity across seemingly unbridgeable divides. As one viewer wrote, "I watched with my father, who I haven't really talked to in years because of politics. When you both started crying, something broke open between us. We still disagree about almost everything, but for the first time in a long time, I remembered that he's a person first, not just a collection of opinions." In an era defined by division, the unexpected moment when Pam Bondi mentioned Pope Robert Prevost created a rare glimpse of what might be possible if we approached our deepest wounds, not as reasons for further separation, but as invitations to a more profound connection. If you found value in this story about finding common humanity across divides, please like and subscribe for more content that highlights these moments of connection. Share in the comments how you've experienced transformation through unexpected encounters in your own life.